Of all the villains in fantasy history, there are few that can rival the Crimson King. He is a supremely powerful monster that served as the primary antagonist of Stephen King's Dark Tower series and the novel Insomnia. A villain whose ultimate motivation was to end reality by destroying the Dark Tower and plunging all the worlds into the Todash darkness. So, who is the Crimson King? He is the king of the lands of Discordia. His first appearance was in the 1994 novel Insomnia, where he served as the puppet master attempting to bring about the death of Patrick Danville, a boy who is fated to destroy him. The Crimson King was defeated momentarily by Ralph Roberts and his plans thwarted, but he later reared his head in the Dark Tower series, where he and his minions were attempting to destroy the beams of the universe holding up the Dark Tower. If he had been successful, he would have collapsed the Dark Tower and plunged the world into Todash darkness, where he would reign forever. However, this plan too was thwarted by Roland Duchaine and his Katet. However, that was not the end of the king. The Crimson King's physical form was trapped on the balcony of the Dark Tower, and in order for Roland to enter the tower and complete his quest, he would need to find a way to destroy the king. However, the Crimson King met his end at the hands of Roland and Patrick Danville. Danville used his powers to erase the Crimson King from reality, leaving nothing but his crimson eyes glaring for eternity on the balcony of the tower. However, because the events of the Dark Tower are stuck in a time loop, the ultimate fate of the Crimson King remains ultimately unknown. The Crimson King appeared in the following stories: Insomnia and The Dark Tower. However, he was mentioned in many Stephen King novels such as The Song of Susanna, The Wolves of the Colour, Wizard and Glass, Winnie Through the Keyhole, The Stand, and Lone Men in Yellow Coats, to name a few. The Crimson King has had many appearances. The most famous picture of him is of a figure atop a throne of skulls wearing a red cloak. However, in his first appearance in Insomnia, he is a shapeshifter, who is hinted at being the same demonic species as Pennywise the Clown from It. He had hypnotic ghost lights, much like Pennywise, and appeared to Ralph Roberts as the Fisher King, a horrid, monstrous being with the head of a catfish, which was one of Roberts' deepest childhood fears. However, when Roland finally meets the king in the finale of the Dark Tower, he appears as a sort of demonic Santa Claus, an old man with a long white beard and a red cloak. The Crimson King's portrayals are exceptionally inconsistent. In some versions of the character, he is an undying demonic creature capable of shape-changing, but by the end of the Dark Tower, he is more of an insane mortal sorcerer who had become undead and thus unkillable, after killing himself and most of his subjects in a fit of insane rage. The Eye of the Crimson King was the sigil his followers used, and it was often accompanied by the slogan, "All Hail the Crimson King." His first appearance was in the novel Insomnia, where he was set up as the Dark Tower's final and ultimate villain, despite not being referenced at all in the first few books of the series. The re-release of The Gunslinger, however, retconned parts of the story to actually reference the king earlier. Most of Insomnia was later retconned by the last book of the Dark Tower anyway. The exact situation of the king is strange because of how many random retcons the Dark Tower series has. For example, it is said that the Crimson King was only imprisoned on the Dark Tower recently in the actual series, but in the flashback stories in One Through the Keyhole, the wizard character Marilyn informs the boy protagonist that the king is already trapped in the tower, even back then, and that it is his ultimate goal to destroy the tower so he can escape. It is heavily hinted at in Insomnia that the Crimson King is a more powerful version of the demon from It, possessing ghost lights and a spider-like appearance. This was retconned too, however, when the undead king at the end of the Dark Tower did not possess any such abilities. There is a scene in the Dark Tower movie where Roland uses a red tarantula to demonstrate to Jake how Walter's master will attempt to get into the universe after the Dark Tower is destroyed. This is an obvious reference to the Crimson King from Insomnia. As a final point of trivia, early versions of the Carrion King from the novel All Hail the Carrion King were loosely based on the Crimson King from Insomnia, and the book even references this fact. There is a scene where Isaac asks the Jester why the Carrion King is called the Carrion King, and he is informed that the Crimson King was already taken. In summary, the Crimson King is one of the most powerful fantasy antagonists of all time. He was the primary villain in one of the greatest pieces of epic fantasy ever written, but I personally feel that the Crimson King was wasted in his role in the Dark Tower, but was a very compelling villain in Insomnia. Stephen King's writing style and inability to plan ahead made this character a mess of retcons and wasted potential, but despite this, he is still an iconic, creepy, and well-designed foe, even if he was reduced to an insane zombie Santa throwing snitches at a cowboy. And that's the end of that. I tried doing something a little different today, but if you want to see me dive into some more classic monsters and villains, let me know and I'll look at making this into an actual series. Like, share and subscribe, and check back for more epic content. Thanks.